さて、投開票が明日に迫った参議院選挙、3連休の中日ということで投票率も気になりますが、
総務省によりますと期日前投票を行った人の数ですが、昨日の時点で2145万220人ということで、これは前回の参院選の同時期がおよそ1612万2000人でしたので、530万人以上多く過去最多を更新しています。
July 19th was the last day of Japan's House of Councillors election. By law, all campaigning had to stop by 8 p.m. that night. So throughout the day, candidates were doing everything they could to make a final push before the cutoff, trying to win that last bit of support. That evening, about 3,000 people gathered at the entrance of Shinjuku Station in Tokyo. One of the candidates, Uryu Hirano, was holding his final rally there, hoping to make a strong last impression before the clock ran out. Uryu Hirano was a dark horse in this House of Councillors election. Before this, hardly anyone knew her. She's a young woman, just 31 years old. But what really surprised people was that on the night before the election, July 19th, around 3,000 people showed up to support Uryu Hirano in person. I've seen a lot of elections in Japan, both local ones like Tokyo's and national ones like this. And to be honest, they're usually pretty low-key. Japanese campaigning tends to be quite subdued. There are generally two common methods candidates use. One is standing alone near a busy subway station with a loudspeaker, giving passionate speeches to passers-by. The other is using a campaign van. Candidates stand on top of the vehicle, giving speeches as they drive through the streets, especially in the evenings. Sometimes they stop in busy areas and share their political views, and people clap politely. Overall, it's very modest, nothing too flashy. That's a huge contrast to Taiwan, where political rallies are full-blown events with giant LED screens, singers, booming sound systems, and crowds that easily reach tens of thousands, sometimes even more. You just don't see that kind of scene in Japan. So for 3,000 people to gather for Uryu Hirano's final rally, that's a big deal by Japanese standards. Why did she get so much attention? One key reason, she's been seen by Japanese media as the most openly anti-China candidate in this election. She's strongly opposed to foreign immigration, especially when it comes to immigrants from China. Uryu Hirano is quite an interesting figure, like something out of a novel. She was born in Chiba Prefecture, just outside Tokyo. Back in junior high, she reportedly suffered domestic abuse from her father, which left her with serious emotional trauma. She even attempted suicide, though fortunately survived. Her grades weren't great, and eventually she dropped out of school. After leaving school, she drifted for a few years. Kind of lost, like many young people in Japan who don't quite know where they're heading. But in her 20s, something changed. She decided to turn her life around and began immersing herself in traditional Japanese culture. She studied flower arrangement, calligraphy, and kimono etiquette. She even became a teacher at a kimono school in Ginza, and is known for wearing kimono regularly in daily life. On top of that, she once played the wife of Sakamoto Ryoma in a Japanese TV drama. She clearly cares deeply about tradition and what she sees as Japan's cultural identity. Funny enough, despite her strong ideas about Japan's future, she had no interest in politics for most of her life. And honestly, that's pretty normal for young people here. I've talked to quite a few of them, and most are pretty detached from politics. Why? Well, Japan's political scene is dominated by old family dynasties. Think of the Koizumis, father, son, grandfather, all politicians. Same goes for the Abe family. If you don't come from that kind of background, it's hard to break into politics. Plus, most politicians are elderly, and younger people rarely have a voice or much representation. So it's no surprise that many young Japanese feel politics has nothing to do with them. Voting rates are low, and political interest even lower. Hirano was the same way, until something happened in 2019 that completely changed her path. In 2019, there was the anti-extradition protest in Hong Kong, something most people remember. But it didn't just stay in Hong Kong. The movement spread to other parts of East Asia, like Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan. Many young people from Hong Kong held protests in these places too, hoping to get local support for their cause.
命がけで戦っている香港の皆様に応援のメッセージを送りたいと思います。香港回遊、香港頑張れ。香港頑張れ。中国に負けるな。応援してます。
At the time, a group of young people from Hong Kong came to Japan. They marched through areas like Harajuku and Shibuya, waving flags that supported Hong Kong independence. That was the first time Uryu Hirano witnessed the Hong Kong protest movement in Japan. According to her, she was deeply moved. She saw these young people full of passion, standing up for what they believed was their country and trying to protect its future, even if the idea of country was, in her words, more symbolic than literal. She thought their courage was admirable.
6時間前にツイッターで、この、抗議のツイートを見て、新幹線に乗りました。昨日渋谷と九段下でも、同じ抗議がありました。私はそちらにも、行っております。私は香港が大好きで、香港には友達もたくさんいます。美しく、そしてとても優しい温かい国です。その香港が今自由を奪われ、発言の権利も奪われ、そして香港が香港ではなくなろうとしています。
So she bought a plane ticket and went to Hong Kong. It was June 2019, the height of the anti-extradition protests. Over 1 million people were marching in the streets. When she got there, she saw the passion and energy of the Hong Kong protesters up close, and she was deeply moved. Right there on the street, she gave a speech. A young Japanese woman publicly supporting Hong Kong citizens and standing against the Chinese Communist Party. Many people in the crowd were touched by her courage. They cheered and applauded her. Bit by bit, she started to gain recognition among Hong Kong protesters. After she returned to Japan, she said she began asking herself a question. Why is Hong Kong in this situation? Her answer: because the CCP is cracking down on them. And why can the CCP do that? Because it's a dictatorship that doesn't respect human rights. But in her eyes, it wasn't just about Hong Kong. Hirano believed that the Chinese Communist Party didn't only want to take control of Hong Kong, it also had its eyes on Taiwan, and maybe even Japan in the future. So she began to openly support Hong Kong independence and Taiwan independence. Back in Japan, she started saying, we have to protect our own country ourselves. She worried that, with more and more Chinese nationals living in Japan, what would happen if they eventually took over? Wouldn't Japan become a colony of China? That thought really unsettled her. Eventually, she made a decision. She wanted to enter politics. But how? She wasn't from a political family, had no party backing, and was just an ordinary citizen. So she started from the street. She went to the entrance of Shinjuku Station and began giving speeches. That kind of grassroots campaigning is actually pretty common in Japan. I've seen it myself, candidates just standing outside train stations with a mic, speaking to whoever passes by. Nothing fancy. Hirano did the same, except she was young and also live-streamed her speeches on YouTube. She mainly focused on 3 points. First, she called for limits on Chinese immigration. She argued that too many Chinese people were moving to Japan, and if that continued, they could eventually become the majority. Then what? Wouldn't Japan lose its identity? Second, she supported independence for both Hong Kong and Taiwan. She believed they shouldn't be under Beijing's control. And third, she said China itself should be broken apart, split into dozens of smaller independent states like Yunnan, Sichuan, Guangdong, and so on. She even went to the Chinese embassy in Tokyo to protest. She held up a sign written in Chinese calling for China to be dismantled. Her third point was about protecting Japan itself. She called on Japanese people to support their own country, buy Japanese products, and stick to things that are made in Japan. She even pointed to what she was wearing and said, "Look at everything I have on. It's all made in Japan." Nothing is made in China.
消費者として自分自身が一人の消費者として責任を持って行動していただきたいのです。中国製以外なら何でも構いません。バングラディッシュ製、カンボジア製、ミャンマー製、インド製、日本にはまださまざまな中国製以外の商品があります。ぜひ中国製以外の商品を買っていただきたいのです。
One thing about this young woman that really stands out, and that many Japanese people admire, is her persistence. She gave speeches at the same spot in Shinjuku day after day for years. At first, no one paid attention. People just walked by. But over time, more and more people started to notice her. That kind of determination is quite rare. However, because she often made extreme comments, like saying Chinese immigrants might one day take over Japan, she started drawing attention from Chinese people living in Japan. During her speeches, there were occasional confrontations. Some Chinese passers-by would try to film her, and her staff would try to stop them. Others would argue with her directly, saying her views were wrong. These moments sometimes led to heated exchanges.
中国の悪口言わないでください。
何中国
中国人ですよ。
あ、そうなんだ。いや、移民反対なんで、移民反対なんで。悪口じゃないですよ。中国人の移民がどんどん増え続けています。いつか私たちは。
After those confrontations were posted online, her popularity really started to grow. Once people saw a Japanese woman arguing with Chinese right in the middle of Tokyo, it got a lot of attention. That's how she went from being a total nobody to someone people actually started to notice.
これが中国人ですからね。こうやってね、これが中国人ですよ。ここに中国人いますね。中指さしてる中国人、緑色の洋服の中国人いますね。動画してきた。中国人がいますね。日本人とは完全に違う民族だ。あれが中国人ですからね。皆様よくわかりましたね。
By 2024, she took things to the next level and founded a group called the Uryu Kai, basically her political support organization. That's when she made it clear. She wasn't just going to give speeches on the street anymore. She wanted to officially enter Japanese politics. In her view, street activism alone wasn't enough to change the country. Then, in 2025, she went ahead and registered as a candidate in Japan's House of Councillors election. As part of the campaign, each candidate has to present their political platform, and hers had about 6 main points. Interestingly, 5 out of the 6 were directly related to China or Chinese people.
第1に中国人に対する入国規制の強化。第2に中国資本による土地買収の規制強化。第3に帰化制度の厳格化。さらに経営管理ビザの習得要件見直しにより不正な在留を防ぎます。そしてスパイ防止法の制定。
One of her main ideas was to limit Chinese immigration, saying the numbers were getting too high. She also wanted to stop Chinese nationals from buying property in important areas of Japan. In her view, places with strategic value shouldn't be sold to foreigners so easily. She called for stricter rules for getting Japanese citizenship, saying people should at least speak proper Japanese and pledge loyalty to the country. She also criticized the investment visa system, pointing out that most people using it were from China. She felt it was wrong for someone to get a visa just by putting up money and then freely start doing business in Japan. So out of her 6 main policies, 5 were directly related to China. The time between her registration and election day wasn't very long. On July 20th, the votes were counted. She didn't win, but got 230,000 votes, or 3.4% of the total. That's actually pretty impressive for a first-time independent candidate. Some media in Taiwan even said she lost with honor. In her thank you speech, she said, "I didn't win. I'm sorry." But she also said she would keep going in politics.
ありがとうございました。次は必ず勝ち抜いてまいります。次の戦いに向けて私平野龍挑戦を続けてまいります。日本を中国の植民地にさせないために、日本を移民国家にさせないために本当にありがとうございました。もうありがとうございました。次戦ってまいります。はい。ありがとうございました。
Today, while I'm telling the story of Uryu Hirano, I also want to talk a bit about Japan's recent House of Councillors election. This election has been described by many domestic and international media, by that I mostly mean Japanese and foreign outlets, as a historic turning point in Japan's post-war political scene. Why? Because for decades, Japan has basically been ruled by a single dominant party, the Liberal Democratic Party, or LDP. Except for a brief period when it was in the opposition, the LDP has held power almost continuously since 1955. But not long ago, Japan got a new Prime Minister, Shigeru Ishiba. After taking office, he dissolved the House of Representatives and called for a snap election. That move didn't go well. The LDP suffered a major defeat, losing its majority in the lower house. So when it came time for this House of Councillors election, everyone was watching closely. Would the LDP lose its majority in the upper house too? Let me quickly explain how the House of Councillors works. There are 248 seats in total, and they're distributed based on population and region. Each prefecture gets at least 2 seats, with more for places that have larger populations. For example, Tokyo has 12 seats, while Hokkaido has 3. Members serve for 6 years, but elections are held every 3 years, replacing half the seats at a time. So this time, about 124 seats were up for election. For Tokyo, 6 seats were on the ballot. Before the election, many people predicted that the LDP was in trouble. Over the past couple of years, public dissatisfaction had grown. One major issue was the rising cost of rice, and rice is a huge part of daily life in Japan. It nearly doubled in price over the past year, making it hard for many families. Then there was the issue of US trade relations. Prime Minister Ishiba tried to negotiate with Donald Trump over tariffs, but Trump wasn't exactly friendly toward Japan. He pushed for a 25% tariff on Japanese goods, and in the last 3 months, Japan's exports to the US have dropped sharply. So public frustration with the LDP was running high. Many predicted they would lose this time, and on July 20th, that's exactly what happened. The LDP, along with its coalition partner Komeito, only won 47 out of the 124 seats that were up for grabs. Even when you include the seats that weren't up for re-election, the LDP ended up with just 101 seats total. That means, for the first time since 1955, the Liberal Democratic Party has lost its majority in both houses of Japan's parliament, the House of Representatives and the House of Councillors. This was something truly unprecedented, a major event in Japanese politics in the last 60 or 70 years. Now, the election result didn't immediately force the LDP out of power. That's because Japan's opposition parties are still divided and don't really get along with each other. So the chances of them forming a united coalition government are very slim. But this result could still bring instability and confusion to Japan's political landscape. Without a majority, the LDP might find its policies blocked in the Diet. And if their usual partner, Komeito, can't help them form a solid majority, they'll have to seek support from smaller opposition parties, which would mean making compromises and political deals. In fact, the LDP had already started to shift before the election. One clear sign was when they set up a new department called the Foreign Residence Affairs Office. On paper, it sounded nice, like it was meant to support foreign residents. But in reality, it was more about monitoring and controlling foreigners in Japan. Right now, information like tax records, pension data, and traffic violations is handled separately across different government departments. This new office was meant to centralize all that data into one system. What does that mean in practice? It means even a small mistake in daily life could cause trouble. For example, when renewing a visa. Many saw this move as an attempt by the LDP to appeal to more conservative or anti-immigration voters. But clearly, it didn't help them win. They still suffered a major loss. The biggest shift in this election was actually the rise of new opposition forces. And the biggest surprise was a party called Sanseito, the Party for the People. This party was only founded in 2019, around the time of the pandemic. Its founder, Sohei Kamiya, was originally a member of the Liberal Democratic Party, but after losing a race for the House of Representatives, he left and teamed up with others to start this new party. During the pandemic, Sanseito gained attention by spreading anti-vaccine messages and pushing a kind of nationalist, populist rhetoric. Their core message was, "Give Japan back to the Japanese." In this election, their biggest slogan was "Japan First." Sounds familiar, right? Like Trump's "America First"? That's no coincidence. Kamiya openly admitted that he borrowed the idea directly from Donald Trump.
America first. America first.
When they talk about Japan first, what it really means is putting more focus on protecting Japanese interests, limiting immigration, and making sure resources and benefits go to Japanese citizens first. Sanseito is a conservative, right-leaning party. In the past, Japan's conservative right wing was mostly made up of older men. If you went to Yasukuni Shrine on August 13th any given year, you'd mostly see elderly men still clinging to the pride of the former Japanese empire. Young right-wingers were almost non-existent. But with the rise of Sanseito, that's changed. The party gained a surprisingly strong following among young people. One of the reasons is their smart use of the internet and social media. Most of their candidates are active on platforms like YouTube and Twitter, and some have large followings. Their online engagement is much higher than the LDP's. Also, their message about protecting Japan, restoring national pride, and resisting foreign influence clearly resonated with younger voters. In this election, they won 14 seats, which is a huge jump. They only had one seat before, so now they hold 15 seats in the upper house. Of the 14 new seats, 7 came from direct electoral districts, and the other 7 came from proportional representation. That is, based on the percentage of votes the party received nationwide. In Japan's upper house system, 50 seats are allocated this way, and Sanseito got about 11% of the vote, which earned them 7 proportional seats. That's a strong result for a new party. Their direct election wins mostly came from urban areas like Tokyo, Osaka, and Fukuoka. That's because in big cities, each district elects multiple candidates, which gives smaller parties a better chance. In rural areas, by contrast, most districts are single winner, so it's much harder for new or minor parties to break through. Exit polls showed a clear generation gap. About 20% of voters in their 30s voted for Sanseito, while most voters, over 60, still supported the traditional parties like the LDP and Komeito. That's why the rise of Sanseito caught the attention of international media. For the first time, Japan saw a right-wing nationalist party led by young people gaining real political power. That just hadn't happened before. And this time, issues around foreigners in Japan became a central theme in the entire campaign. Public debate focused on questions like, are foreigners taking Japanese jobs? Should Japan tighten its immigration policies? Should more foreigners be asked to leave? Sanseito rode this wave of public anxiety and emotion about identity, economy, and culture, and successfully entered the upper house as Japan's third largest party. That's why some have called this election result a watershed moment in Japanese politics. Now I want to share some of my own thoughts on this election, and also on the rise of the political right in Japan. As I mentioned earlier, Sanseito's core support base is made up of young people. So why are so many young Japanese supporting a party with such a strong anti-immigration stance? I think one major reason is that young people in Japan today are genuinely frustrated. We all know that after Japan's bubble economy burst, the country entered what people call the lost 30 years. And during that time, it was the younger generation that suffered the most. For 30 years, wages in Japan have barely grown. Today, most college graduates desperately try to get into big companies, especially in big cities like Tokyo and Osaka, because those jobs offer better pay and stability. Many young people leave rural areas to move to major cities. Why? Because of declining birth rates, small towns are becoming hollowed out. There are fewer job opportunities and even fewer chances to find a partner. In some areas, it's not just hard to find work. It's hard to find someone to marry. So these young people all flock to cities like Tokyo, Osaka, and Fukuoka. But if you can't get into a major company, what the Japanese call daite kigyo, then honestly, it's hard to survive. You can't afford a home. You might not even be able to get married. It's a bleak situation. I remember talking to a journalist from Hiroshima last year. He had moved to Tokyo for work. He's 40, still single. I asked him, why not date or get married? He said, I can't afford it. I just can't. His income was unstable and low. And in Japanese society, men are still expected to be the primary breadwinners. So if you don't earn enough, many women simply won't consider marrying you. That's why many young men in urban Japan feel hopeless. To put things in perspective, big-name companies only make up about 20% of the entire job market. Unless you graduated from a top school, it's hard to get in. And even if you do, Japan still uses a seniority-based system. You start with low pay and have to wait years to climb the ladder. At the same time, Japan's low birth rate has put serious pressure on the welfare system. That means more taxes, especially higher consumption tax, and increased social security contributions. For example, bonuses used to be exempt from social security payments. Now even bonuses are taxed. So a lot of young people feel like they're the ones carrying the burden for an aging society. That's the first reason. Growing frustration from a generation that feels squeezed economically and socially. The second reason is Japan's economic decline in recent years. Japan's manufacturing sector is facing strong competition from countries like China and Vietnam. Take Nissan, which used to be one of Japan's most respected car companies. It's now close to collapse and might be absorbed by Toyota. Even Toyota, the crown jewel of Japanese industry, is starting to lose ground globally, especially with the rise of China's electric vehicle industry and companies like Tesla, which have shaken up the entire auto market. So overall, the Japanese economy has been stuck in a long period of stagnation. And when the economy stalls, public sentiment tends to shift to the right. You can see the same pattern in other countries. Take the US, for example. Why did someone like Trump rise to power? At the core, it was because the American economy was in decline. And during times of economic decline, societies often swing rightward. Or look at Germany. Not everyone may know this, but Germany also has a far-right party that some call neo-Nazi in nature. That too is closely tied to Germany's recent economic troubles. Right-wing parties often take complicated social and economic problems and reduce them to a simple slogan. Trump's message was, it's all the immigrants' fault. So get rid of the illegal immigrants, and America will be great again. That was the pitch. The same thing is happening in Japan. Right-wing parties here are blaming Japan's loss of global competitiveness on foreigners, especially Chinese residents in Japan, claiming they're stealing job opportunities from Japanese people. But honestly, that's just not true. From what I've seen in daily life, foreign residents in Japan generally fall into two main groups. One group includes people with money, who simply enjoy Japan's lifestyle and environment. They're not in direct competition with local workers. In fact, they often create jobs. The second group is made up of low-wage foreign laborers, like many from Vietnam or Myanmar. They take on jobs that Japanese people no longer want to do, like working night shifts at 24-hour convenience stores. Most of these workers are doing part-time, low-paying jobs. Nothing fancy, just enough to get by. Are they stealing jobs from Japanese people? Not really. Because if you ask Japanese workers to take those same jobs, they simply wouldn't do it. It's actually very similar to the US, where many undocumented immigrants work on farms, doing tough labor that Americans often refuse to take. But right-wing groups spin these situations into something else. They use economic fear to stoke anti-immigrant sentiment, and it spreads. Remember that episode we talked about a while back, about a guy in Nara Park? His name is Harada, and he was going around harassing Chinese tourists, accusing them of kicking deer. He made a big scene, filmed it, and posted the videos on YouTube and Twitter. This same guy, who's actually a convicted shoplifter and on probation, ended up running in the Nara City Council election this year, and unbelievably, he won. People call him a meiwaku YouTuber, which basically means a nuisance or troublemaking YouTuber. Even many Japanese people don't really understand his behavior, but somehow this guy, who built a name by picking fights with Chinese tourists, managed to get elected to public office. All of this really comes down to one thing: the political exploitation of tension between Chinese people and Japanese society. That's the second major reason for the rise of the right. Now, for the third point, I actually think there are some issues where it's reasonable to discuss how foreign residents are treated in Japan. Not all of the right-wing arguments are entirely wrong. For example, I do agree with one point often raised by conservatives. There are currently no restrictions on foreigners buying property in Japan. This has led to a real issue in cities like Tokyo and Osaka, where housing prices have skyrocketed. Ordinary Japanese workers simply can't afford to buy homes anymore. It's become a huge source of frustration. It's been reported that in Tokyo, up to half of property buyers are foreign investors, and among them, around 50% are reportedly from China. They buy properties quickly and flip them for profit. As a result, housing prices in Tokyo have doubled in just a few years, leaving regular salaried workers priced out of the market. In many other countries, there are rules to protect the local housing market. For example, in Singapore, foreign buyers must pay an additional 40% tax. In Australia, foreigners can only buy certain types of properties, and they can only sell to other foreigners, not to locals. These rules are meant to protect housing supply for residents and keep the market more stable. So when some Japanese people call for stricter rules on foreign property ownership, I actually think that's a fair and necessary discussion. This isn't about blindly supporting or opposing foreigners. There are reasonable boundaries, especially when it comes to national housing and social stability. What I disagree with is how some right-wing groups take one valid issue and blow it way out of proportion. They exaggerate the conflict between foreigners and Japanese people, and many of their claims are just not based on facts. Take crime, for example. During the election, Sanseito and other right-wing voices claimed that foreigners have higher crime rates in Japan, but official data says otherwise. Over the past 30 years, the foreign population in Japan has nearly tripled, from about 1.3 million to 3.7 million. But during the same period, the number of crimes committed by foreigners actually dropped, from around 14,000 cases per year to 9,000. So despite more foreigners living in Japan, the crime numbers have gone down. Clearly, it's wrong to say that foreigners are making Japan less safe. Yes, there are occasional issues with tourists. Some of them don't understand Japanese customs or rules, and conflicts happen. That's normal in any tourist-heavy country. Japan is trying to boost its economy by welcoming more foreign visitors, so these kinds of situations are part of the trade-off. You see the same thing in any country that relies heavily on tourism. Another common claim is that Chinese people are going to take over Japan and turn it into some kind of colony. That's just nonsense. In 2024, only about 3,100 Chinese nationals became Japanese citizens. The total number of people who naturalized in Japan that year was around 8,800. For the first time, Chinese surpassed Koreans as the top group applying for Japanese nationality. But 3,100 out of 130 million people? That's barely a blip. Let's do the math. Even if that number stays steady, that's only 31,000 people in 10 years, or 300,000 in 100 years. And that's not counting the people who pass away during that time. Even if you multiply the number by 10, that's 3 million over a century, which is still just a tiny fraction of Japan's total population. So the claim that Japan is being colonized by Chinese immigrants just doesn't hold water. It's a myth, and a dangerous one that's being used to stoke fear and win votes. Personally, I believe that no matter what your political stance is, any serious political discussion must be based on facts. If facts are ignored, and political parties built on rumours or false narratives can still win seats in Parliament, that's extremely dangerous. Sometimes populist ideas may not seem harmful at first, But what's even more dangerous is when political identity becomes irrational, when people support a movement not because of logic or truth, but because of emotion or misinformation. Some people say Sanseito might just be a flash in the pan, that in 4 years they may lose relevance. But the truth is, populist forces like this often adapt and evolve. And once a certain political trend takes hold, things can change very quickly. That's why this kind of shift can be quite risky. For those of us who live in Japan, of course we want this country to become better. But as we watch the rise of political forces built on xenophobia and lies, we need to stay vigilant. Interestingly, there was one candidate in this election who deserves some attention, Yoshinaga. She's a naturalized Japanese citizen who originally came from China 28 years ago. She works as a certified administrative specialist here in Japan. Earlier this year, she ran for a seat in the Tokyo Metropolitan Assembly but didn't win. Then she turned around and ran for the House of Councillors. During her campaign, she went out into the streets every day, holding up a sign and speaking with passers-by, just like many grassroots candidates in Japan. In the end, she got about 15,000 votes. Not a huge number, but what happened during her campaign was quite telling. At one point, she made a post on the Chinese platform Xiaohongshu, saying she hoped to defend the rights of Chinese people living in Japan. That post triggered a backlash from both sides. Some Chinese netizens criticized her, saying, "You're a Japanese citizen now. Why are you still talking about defending Chinese people?" At the same time, many Japanese netizens questioned her too, asking, "If you're Japanese, why are you focused on Chinese residents' rights?" She found herself stuck in the middle, caught between two identities, trying to represent a voice that often goes unheard. But I don't think there was anything wrong with her message. Yes, Japan is not an immigration country in the traditional sense, but it does have millions of foreign residents today, including both naturalized Japanese citizens and long-term visa holders. Take myself, for example. I haven't naturalized, but I hold a long-term visa and live and work here. Do people like us deserve to have our rights protected? Of course we do. We live in this society. We contribute to it. We raise families, pay taxes, and build communities here. So it's essential that we are treated equally without discrimination, and that we can live side by side with Japanese citizens in mutual respect. That's the foundation of a healthy, forward-looking society. That's why I hope that more Chinese people in Japan, whether naturalized or not, can support candidates like Yoshinaga. People who speak up, who participate in politics, and who represent the real, lived experiences of the foreign community in Japan. Everyone who lives here, Japanese or foreign, should be treated equally under the law. Only then can Japan truly live up to its name as the light of Asia. That's all I wanted to share today. Thank you.
就是你作为一个日本人，
对，
你为什么这么支持基友们？
因为现在那个选举期间啊，很多政客，污蔑外国人，得到他们的一些想要的票啊，就是整个日本社会啊，就开始排斥外国人了，这不应该的。就是我一直做中日友好活动都是为了给中国人讨回公道。有些那个右翼他们是只说排斥外国人，那排斥外国人的话，日本的劳动力远远不足够了，是吧？到处你看这个餐厅都是中国人开的，还有一些便利店啊，好几个餐厅都是中国人，劳动人民有这个劳动人民才日本人可以享受外面吃饭，是不是？还有买东西什么的哈，不能排斥外国人，请外国人是我们的贵宾啊。
日本国民、日本居民和在日华人也是日本的生活者的利益冲突吗？摩擦或许有，但是我们要冲突吗？不要。为什么要冲突啊？当然要双赢啊。所以，难道为了日本人利益就你一定要贬损中国人、华人利益吗？我说为了华人利益就一定要伤害到日本国民利益吗？我等一下还要去警署报警，因为在前天的那个阿贝玛プライム的那个直播的时候搞对谈的，就是这次那个参议院选举，大概出席了20多个人，我被另外一个初选人给暴力了。是的，他打我啊。对，这事明儿可能会见报。他的所谓的对策就是一刀切。极坚决反华，对吧？而且我一看不行，这很恐怖呀！